It's playing the shed day today, and today's challenge is to build a Kant twist clamp. And I've started laying out the bits on some 2mm stainless steel. There are heaps of videos on YouTube about building these clamps, and from the pictures I've drawn some schematics of the way I'm going to build it. And this is what the finished product is going to look like. I'm building the frame first, and just using the cut out pieces of paper I'm marking where the various holes go, and I've just traced around the outside with a pen. Now I'm going to cut out a nice rectangular piece and then cut another blank the same, put them together because I want the holes to be exact the same. And to make sure I do that, I'm just going to tack it with my welder to keep those pieces together until I've cut out the shape. I don't particularly like drilling stainless with my cheap drills, but they do the job. Once all the holes are drilled, it's just a simple matter of cutting out the basic outline with the cut-off disc on the angle grinder. Using a flap disc on the other angle grinder, I now just smooth it out to the line. And I leave both pieces tacked together until the very last moment. Then it's off to the disc sander just to take off those rough edges. Lastly, the buffing wheel just makes it nice and shiny. That's all 4 bits of the frame done. Time now to do the posts that hold those frames together. There are 3 at 20mm and 2 at 16. And I'll be tapping an M5 thread that holds the frame to those posts. Because I can, I'm using the lathe to do this little job. Of course it could be done in a vise and just using the drill press, but this is much easier. So with the 10mm aluminium rod in the lathe, I'm just drilling the tapping size for the M5 thread. Now with the thread tapped to the 20mm, I can mark off a 20mm length and then part it off in the lathe. But before I finish parting off, I just use a couple of grits of emery paper and then some 00 steel wool just to make it nice and shiny. There's one done, 4 more to go. All 5 posts have now been made. As I said, these posts are the posts that hold the frame together. So now it's time to do the pivoting bits. So first of all, the pivot arm. And I'm going to do these bits out of brass just to make it look a bit prettier. Well, there's the first brass bit done. Next is the bit for the screw. This one's similar to the other, but it's got a hole through it for the screw thread. So again, just on the lathe using exactly the same process. I just make another little post, and it's quite satisfying to just put the auto feed on the lathe and see the tool slowly peel off the brass. As before finally parting it off, I just use a couple of grits of emery paper and then finish off with steel wool for a nice shiny finish. Next is the other end of the screw, which is just a pivot that goes on the end. Going to make this out of brass as well. And there we go. Magic of television. Lastly, just the top of the screw. Again, I'm going to make it out of brass, and this time I'm going to knurl it. Don't really need to knurl it, but I'm going to do it just because it looks pretty. And my shed-made knurling tool works a treat because it clamps top and bottom. It doesn't put undue pressure on the lathe. And there's the final result. Looks pretty. It's just a matter now of chamfering both edges. I'm using a bit of M8 all thread for the screw, and I'm just going to drill and tap a thread so that I can screw that into the end. And again, using the lathe for this ensures that the thread's nice and straight, and it's a lot easier to do than sitting on a bench in a vise or something. That's all the lathe work done, so now I'm using my little milling attachment to do the rest of the job. Sure, this could be done with a bench drill or a vise, but because I've got the tool, I'm going to use it. And it ensures that everything's nice and straight. To get the hole right in the centre, I'm just moving backwards and forwards till the ruler is completely horizontal. I'm using a centre drill to start with to make sure that there's no wandering when I drill with the actual drill. I'm just drilling out a 6.5mm hole for a 6-ish mil rod that goes into it as the little Tommy bar that'll go on the end of the screw. And to ensure the threaded rod doesn't come out from the knob, I'm just drilling a 2.4mm hole that goes through the knob and through the rod, and then I'll just put a little pin in that, and that'll hold the knob onto the threaded rod. And a little bit of Loctite will ensure that it doesn't come out again. I'm using a bit of 6mm stainless rod for the Tommy bar, and instead of just having it free floating, I think I'll put a little grub screw in that'll hold it in place if necessary. So again, I'll just leave the bar in there so that I can get it completely horizontal before I drill the hole. So I'm just going to drill a 5mm hole for a 6mm thread to put a grub screw in it. I'm using an M6 machine tap, but I don't trust myself So I'm tapping it by hand. Next job is to tap the hole right through this post that the threaded rod goes through. Just like this. And it runs nice and smooth. On the lathe, I'd previously cut a slot in the other end of that threaded rod. That slot is what the little grub screw will run in, so that the little brass end can just pivot on it. So with that grub screw screwed in and then just backed out slightly, it pivots freely. The last job before assembly is to make the jaws, and I'm making this out of 20mm thick aluminium, and they'll just be 20 by 20 squares. Now that they're rough cut out on the bandsaw, I'm using the milling machine to square them up and to make them nice and smooth. Final step, I'm just using a chamfering tool to cut 2 slots in one face. This will enable the jaws to grab something round. A 10mm hole will allow one of the posts that I made previously to slide in easily. Now let's give it a test, just to make sure everything's hunky and dory. Yep, beautiful. Now that I've got all the pieces made, it's time for final assembly. And I'm just using a bit of blue Loctite on the M5 bolts to make sure that they stay nice and tight. So the first part is to screw the posts on one side. As I said, these posts will hold the frame together, and then the pivoting pieces are just held in there by the 2 frames. I'm using stainless dome head Allen bolt heads for a nice neat looking finish. Alrighty then, just a final tweak to make sure that the jaws pivot properly. and everything's working, and it looks like a thing of beauty. So let's give it a test with a bit of round bar. The way the clamp works, it clamps very securely, and it looks very pretty. And after all, who doesn't like playing with a pretty tool? And you can see that one face of the jaws has the slots both ways, and the other's smooth. It's my second best buddy Norman's birthday today, and I've been slaving away in the shed most of the day making this clamp. The clamp is Norman's birthday present. Happy birthday, Norman.